And so yet another installment into the hidden history of the African American fighting man. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I've shared with you the debacle that the Confederacy was in when it came down to prisoners. Jeff Davis wrote about it in his book. Robert E. Lee even weighed in. However, the Confederate States denied prisoner of war status to captured African American soldiers or their Caucasian officers at first. Confederate commanders were ordered to turn captured Negro soldiers over to the governments in the states to be dealt with however they would like, and it was summarily death. You heard me right. Any African American who was fighting for his freedom in uniform of blue, summarily put to death. You see, the reason why they were turned over to the states was because all of the southern states, or should I say the states of the Confederacy, had laws that prescribed death to African American insurrectionists, which was well known by 1863. Any Negro who fought against the Confederacy for his freedom was summarily killed. Which is why any African American who would support anything Confederate is just plain old stupid. I don't know how else to describe this, or maybe even ignorant. Or why any Caucasian who would think that an African American would revere anything Confederate is just plain old stupid, or just ignorant, or just arrogant, born out of ignorance. So here you have Negroes in uniform, or men who were captured who were summarily killed, burned, whichever. General Grant ordered that all prisoners' exchange ceased. And you know the story of this. Abe Lincoln came with the eye for an eye rule. Robert E. Lee objected to the fact that they had to exchange prisoners. But here's what you didn't know, that I did not tell you in that story. According to the War Department, finally, Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis acquiesced. Finally, they said, okay, I tell you what we'll do. We'll do these prisoner exchanges. Grudgingly. We're not going to try, we're not going to exchange men who are in uniform who we think were enslaved. We will return the free people of color. First, they started there. Ultimately, they had to return all of them, but at first, they didn't want to. So Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis finally decided, in 1864, okay, we will exchange the free people of color for Confederate prisoners. However, no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. He said, we will release the free people of color, but we cannot release them equitable to the Caucasians who are in prison. I don't know.
Prisoners of war.
Prisoners of war. In other words, rebels could not consider them equal, so therefore it couldn't be an African American free man of color for a Caucasian Confederate in prison.
Hold on.
Which resulted in the Confederacy allowing their men to stay imprisoned, if in fact the exchange was a Negro freedman for a Confederate prisoner.
Then the rebels stayed in prison.
Absolutely. Because it's a contradiction to their white supremacist views as per the Constitution. So rather than exchange, rather than confirm that a free Negro was equal to a Confederate soldier, they said let him stay in jail. Some hate, man. I can't make this up. Don't take my word for it. If you are a Confederate descendant, you need to check this to realize just how ignorant your great-great-granddaddy was. And some of them were stationed. Look, ladies and gentlemen, Ship Island, just 12 miles off the coast of Mississippi, was a penal island. There were Confederates who were imprisoned there, and the garrison that imprisoned them were African American. They were the Native Guard. One of those individuals was the predecessor of one Dr. Gilbert R. Mason. I think his name was Gustav. If I'm not mistaken, when I was riding out there with the good doctor, he had learned of of one of his relatives who were there stationed at Ship Island by the name of Gustav. Sure, he would be delighted to hear that. All right, folks, keep that in mind. Look, I don't say this because I'm angry. Look, my dad always told me, he said, boy, depression comes from trying to change the past, and anxiety comes from trying to control the future. You're powerless to change the past, and you certainly can't control the future. However, by knowing the past, it prepares you today. And by what you do today, you can influence what happens tomorrow. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that many of you in this great country of mine, as did I, don't know the history. You don't know the history, and so therefore there's not much you learn from it. And I do appreciate those individuals who've written me countless numbers of letters and the like, because I reveal this. I know, I guess it's history, but it's new to you because it's not told. I didn't know it either until I read it. And done extraordinary research, and thanks to many friends like Ike Edwards and others who provided me with some methods of doing so. And look, folks, it's very, very simple to go to the Department of Archives or the War Department if you feel so inclined. But it's just stunning to me. It's stunning to me how any person, Caucasian or African American, any modern American can look upon this very bleak time called the Civil War and have some bragging right and walk away with some kind of great puffed up feeling about what actually happened. And when you read about it, particularly if you are of Confederate descent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, really. Don't just be ignorant. I mean, you really shouldn't. You owe it to your great-great-granddaddies to be, who I don't doubt wanted to pretend to be dignified, even if they had different political views or humanitarian views. At least dignify them by learning of them. All right, folks, let's get to it. Got a lot to cover, short period of time. I'm going to go ahead and deal with an email that I had from an individual who was a little bit taken aback by all the Weinstein, now Spacek, well, whatever. They're going through Hollywood now. Hollywood. First, it was Capitol Hill. You saw a lot of this kind of
going way back.
Kind of fraternization or unwarranted fraternization.
Harassment.
Abuse, harassment, unwanted advances. So I had a person, a man actually, a young man. He described himself, young man in his 27, 20, late 20s. He said, Rip, with all this going on, what is an unwanted advance? Without going into great details, the guy says he really appreciated my stories about, what I learned in the barbershops. That used to be the school. I would hope it's still the same way. Just wonder what the professors are teaching in the barbershop. I don't doubt that they're teaching them pretty good. I hope it's not a whole bunch of... So he goes on to say, well, I've been hearing all this about Weinstein. Of course, it all went back to Bill Cosby, and now Weinstein, now Kevin, and I don't doubt there's going to be many others. Ben Affleck now has come forward to say, well, I need to check myself. So this young man just simply says, what is unwarranted advances? I'm going to deal with this. This is not something we're going to occupy the entire show because there's other fish to fry. But for the sake of you, I'm going to express to you what those old fellows shared with me. And some of you guys who will relate to this. Unwanted advances is anything that a woman says she doesn't want. Simple as that. An unwanted advance is when you decide just because you find something fascinating by her or that you're smitten by her that you decide to approach. Now, if she turns and looks at you and not respond, she doesn't want to be bothered. Under no circumstances should you touch a woman, period. No circumstances. Unless she wants it. or unless accidentally you grab her elbow. I see the look on your face, Ro, but under no circumstances do you touch. See, the litmus test those old guys told us was you treat any woman like you'd want a man to treat your mama. Now, if you don't want me dealing with your mama like this, don't you deal with my daughter like this. I remember that very well. Mr. Haynes said that.
Did you hear that personally?
I did hear that. I did. Now, if you don't want me to dog out your mama, don't dog out my daughter. And it was relevant. But for the sake of the mere fact, and this young man said that he did not have that kind of tutelage, did not have a father in the house, did have some uncles, but they were distant. Just to be more specific, here's the rules. Ladies, if you take issue with this, please call me. I can stand corrected, but this is what I was told as a young man. Under no circumstances do you touch a woman in the front anywhere at any given time. Her frontal view is never, ever to be touched, unless it is acceptable behavior above her shoulders, period. And at that point, she's able to then defend herself, you see. So nowhere below the neck in the front can you touch. I'm going to get to the back. Be patient. So, unless she accepts that, you will know that when you come within 3 feet of her. If, in fact, she walks, you walk upon her, and she steps back, then guess what? That's unwarranted. Whatever other step you make toward her is unwarranted. No, she did not forget anything. No, she was smiling, and that meant okay. You're within 3 feet, within her space, and she steps back, pulls her head back, it's over. The only thing you can do then is verbalize. In the front, nowhere. The thigh, the knee, no. As it comes to the rear, the only place that is acceptable, if in fact she doesn't rebuff you, is above her waist and below her breast. That is in the midpoint of her back, small of her back. That's it. And her elbow. Anywhere above her breast, like on her shoulders or her neck, and never, ever, ever touch a woman on the back of her head. Never, ever, ever touch her hair at all. Look, I'm just telling you. I guess that there's some young boys who ain't picked this up. Never had this kind of tutelage. I'm going on the record. I'm going on the record. These are things that a woman should. These are things that a woman automatically know that you should know. I don't know. They grow up with it. As young girls, intuitively, they know what their space is, and they will give you the boundaries. And you've got to be a smart enough man to check to yourself and see that. If she doesn't answer you, then that's not by mistake. She doesn't want to talk to you. I'm just saying. Never, ever, ever point at a woman. Ever in life. Worst thing you can do is point. Even if it's one to say, yeah, there she is over there. If you point at a woman, it implies that somehow or another she's being clubbed. I'm just saying. Or you are focusing on the least part of her that she wants you to focus on. You could be pointing at her, toward her, and it could be above her head or through her. And the reality is, because you pointed, that whole pointing gesture is not a gesture that is one that a woman finds fascinating, unless she allows you in her space. Let's see. Anything else? Nothing is very, very affectionate, endearing. There's no good way to refer to a woman except by her name. Or Miss, or Mrs., or Ma'am. Any other preposition, any other pronoun would not. Her, she, you, never acceptable for a woman. Oh, I'm sorry, for a lady. I have to, because some women will tolerate that, but ladies don't. Did I cover everything, Rose? I mean, is there any questions? I mean, this guy's 27. He's near your age. Any questions you have regarding this? Of what is an unwarranted advance?
No, my mother taught me about that early.
I would only hope that mothers who don't have fathers in the house would teach their sons exactly what I just said.
Even ones who do, because those fathers might not be giving those sons accurate information.
That's true. There are some things, and I'll say this, and I'm going to move on to the gun thing. There are some things that we as human beings are expected by way of purely nature and instinct to know. You got me? No, really. I don't, look, I'm no scientist, but there are certain things that a woman expects for a man, even a boy, to just automatically know that he should not do. At certain times. Look, male dogs know when a female dog is not at heat. I don't know. It's nasal. I don't know. I mean, any species of animal get this, Ro. There are times when a woman does not want to be bothered, and when the lion looks at the lioness cross-eyed, so to speak, or either with that up and down thing at a time that she doesn't deem it acceptable, you got to back down, bro.
Got to back down. Unless you want to deal with all the lionesses.
All the lionesses. I'm just saying. The whole pride is after you then.
It's not good.
One last thing. Never, ever, ever pit yourself against that woman's child. I'm just going to tell you.
Say it again, brother.
You can't
please.
win that. You can't win that now. You can't. That doesn't mean that she doesn't, she should not, certainly, if you're a stepfather or stepmom. That doesn't mean that she puts that child above you. It does mean you don't pit her against him. In other words, it's either him or me.
Can't do that.
That's never an option. Never an option for a mother and a child. If by chance, ladies, he should do that, run very fast and take your baby with you. All right, okay. I think I covered everything.
Thank you, sir.
You okay with that, Whitlock?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
I mean, you're the resident lady here. Did I say anything that was beyond what you ordinarily would expect of a man?
No,
Hit the points.
he hit the point.
Okay.
Even some I wasn't expecting.
Or like the hair in the back of the head thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You don't do that.
Yeah, even the whole point one.
Yeah.
I don't,
No, you don't do that.
The pointing thing.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
I
You
don't
know-
think people are taught that.
No, they're not taught
You
that.
know?
No, and they should be. You don't point. It's just.
What you pointing at?
Well, I mean, the point is, a female could do it, and that's between you ladies. I was not taught that, but a man under no circumstances points. You know what I mean? You just don't do that. Well, the president's in Asia, and so it's somewhat of a low news day. I mean, he's got his tweets here, but I want to go to what I knew was going to happen. I already predicted it. This whole Sunday school terrorist. Who's not a Sunday school terrorist? It's a domestic dispute, right?
Oh, well, yeah. The grandma got it, yeah. Grandma-in-law. Not a good day at church.
Was grandma? I don't think was grandma-in-law. Yeah, she was there.
Allegedly, grandma-in-law was one of the victims, yeah.
So now, law enforcement, in their quest to prove that this was not a Muslim or terrorist attack, has come up with the concept that this was all domestic. When you have a guy here who has, I'm looking at his Facebook page, has adamantly came out and proclaimed religion as the culprit here for why there's all the ills and why all of those who believe in any kind of religion need to be killed. I mean, he's an atheist. Didn't really just come out and say that. He just simply go on the atheist sites. And then obviously had some kind of appreciation for the fact. And look, some of this stuff, yeah, I'm going to tell you, for some of you guys who are agnostic out there, it kind of makes sense to you. I mean, you hadn't seen them. Look, many, if not most of the wars in this great world was driven by, first, greed, secondly, by religious persecution.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So, I mean, you can't argue with that in some cases. This guy declared war that day. Now, there are reports that indicate he came in and said everybody in the church is going to die. Now, for you to not realize that is this guy's plight against...
That sounds like a motive, Rip.
Sounds like a pretty good motive to me, Ro. He didn't stop at the Burger King. He didn't stop at the Dairy Queen. Or
He
whatever.
didn't say, all non-believers leave now.
No, he didn't. And he was prepared to do a whole lot more damage, so it seems. Fired 450 rounds, and this guy is still not a terrorist. Let me tell you something. You talk about some privilege here. There is some Caucasian privilege that's.
I mean, look.
And,
Just look at it.
and folks, look, I'm only saying this for one reason only. There are no exemptions. Terrorism is, that's what terrorism does. And why there is this move to somehow relegate the Caucasian male to being deranged as opposed to him being vicious, it's just, let me tell you, the same thing happened, hang on, you'll see the relevance of this. They did the same thing with Denmark Vesey when he sought to overthrow Southern slaveholders. When he was executed, not only Denmark Vesey, but Gabriel Prosser and others were executed. They did not. They said that Negro who went on a shooting binge or wanted to go out and kill was deranged. In other words, the idea here was to not make him a martyr. It was to give an excuse beyond the fact that he was a rebel or he was fighting for freedom.
So this doesn't impart any kind of ideology into his mission.
That's correct. In other words, it says to the rest of those who were enslaved that, hey, look, this guy was crazy. This was not purposeful.
He had to be crazy to try to do such a thing.
So you turn the clock forward now, and here we are, well after the Civil War, and you've got this Caucasian male, former military guy who he punched an 11-month-old child so hard that fractured the child's skull, beat a dog, numerous complaints of domestic. So you've got this guy now, and rather than say that he plotted this out, he comes dressed as a soldier with a Kevlar vest and the black and the military-style weapons, but rather than say that this guy had declared war, he's crazy.
He's deranged.
I'm going to submit to you that all of them were crazy. Really. You're crazy for even thinking that. And I think what you do is set all of us up for this to happen again. How many Caucasians now have been shot down? And from Vegas to Texas, we're hovering around 70-something in the last month.
Yeah. Well, more than 70. At least 75 at this point.
I'm only saying Caucasian for one reason only. Again, folks, there is this lessening of the activity. You see, once this falls under the category of a potential terrorist attack, then men like the Sunday school terrorists will then be treated just as Muslims are treated and evaluated. They can end up on a list, bro. They knew this guy had weapons. He was sitting in his house in the middle of the night firing weapons at 2, 3 in the morning. His neighbors knew it. Not that that's illegal in rural Texas. But it would cause some pause if I were a neighbor and go, who is this guy? Let's pull him up. It would have taken a minimal amount of investigation to determine that this guy had a dishonorable discharge, and there he is firing weapons. What I want you to know, for me, that would be just a little bit curious enough for me to say, look, you know, this guy got a gun. Particularly with some of the things he was espousing. You know what I mean? It's like, well, wait a minute now. I got a guy living next to me, and this guy is espousing some pretty crazy stuff here. He's beating this woman.
And his child. And got kicked out of the military. It's a problem.
You know, in other words, at some point, the white boy, in quotes, has to end up on the watch list. Why? Because there's some of them who need to be watched. I didn't exempt Negroes from this. Yes, they need to be watched, but we're talking about this seemingly kind of skin privilege that allows people like this to just go about his business. I guarantee you this guy could have walked down plain old Texas with his Ruger strapped to his back, and nothing would have been said. I mean, it's legal, you know. And then add to the insult, your president and mine, Donald John, steps in and rolls back. And he comes like, oh, this is a mental case. But he rolled back one of President Barack Obama's executive orders And this was an executive order only because the Congress didn't want to act. Now, that's what you have to say when you say executive orders. He's got these executive orders. Well, he had a Congress who just didn't want to act.
Context.
So, Donald John signs a bill revoking Obama-era gun checks for people with mental illness. You can't make this up. And he didn't do it in front of the cameras. He sneaked in at night. He just got rid of the cameras. Didn't have all the people lined up behind him. No photo session, no fanfare when he did this.
Get in, get out.
You see, President Barack Obama, because Congress did not want to act, there was a rule which was finalized, in December. Where was it? What it did was, it forced Social Security, or people who got Social Security checks for mental illness, and people deemed unfit to handle their own financial affairs to be on the National Background Check database. Does that sound? In other words, if you can't handle your own financial affairs, or if you are on a mental case and you're getting SSI, then you should be on the background check list. I mean, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Sounds reasonable.
Donald John said, no, we're going to roll that back. Now, this was pushed by the NRA. In other words, and the reason why they did it was PSD, post-traumatic stress disorder individuals that, coming out of the military and so forth. Oh, yeah. We wanted to be able to have firearms as well. Well, I want you to know, folks, this is about the dumbest thing. Well, Donald John came on saying this is a mental problem, but yet doesn't admit that he rolled back some evaluation. What this did was, when Obama did this, it affected about 75,000 people in the database. It said, okay, look, all we're going to do is forward the names of those individuals who are getting SSI over to you. And to the national, where is it? Let's see, it's called the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. There it is. That's it. Made sense, doesn't it? Doesn't that make sense?
It does.
So in other words, if someone is getting SSI, someone's getting Social Security because of the mental illness.
There's a flag by there.
There's a flag. That doesn't say that they won't be able to get a gun, but it simply says to the FBI, you know what? You might need to check this one out. Yeah. Under the federal law, patients who have been committed to mental institutions are deemed mentally defective, and they can be denied the right to purchase or carry a firearm. Commercial gun dealers must do a background check. So when the commercial dealers do the background check and they see this flag, then it's up to them then at that point to say, well, okay, that flag there, that's mental. There's no excuses there. So now it's come out that the Air Force inadvertently did not add this guy, supposedly. Now you got to keep in mind when all of this gun purchasing took place, it was when the NRA adamantly had objected to President Barack Obama putting this forward. I don't doubt that there are some even in the military who feel that somehow or another there's that the Second Amendment is under attack, and that's just bull, folks. It's not under attack. I'm going to say this, and then I will move on, I promise you. You gun advocates have got to, you can't have it both ways. If you tell Rip Daniels you support law enforcement, then by God, you better support that which will keep them safe. And there's nothing more that's going to keep them safe outside of the inaccessible, the inaccess to weapons by citizens, period. Over and above. Look, I'm a citizen. But I can guarantee you any law enforcement anywhere will feel a whole lot safer as they do in Japan if there is not as many weapons in the room. When you tell me that gun control doesn't work, I point at Australia, I point at Japan, I even point at London. Let me tell you what Oxy conservatives do. I really would wish that there's someone I could debate with. And let's not get into. I want to deal with real facts and figures with you. Here's what they do. They say, well, what could have been done to stop this? In other words, it's all or none. They don't look at the fact. They say, oh well, if they had regulations on assault weapons, then, it wouldn't have stopped him. He would have got one anyway. And guess what, Rip? There was a gun, there was a rifle that stopped him. Thank God for that. They don't look at the mere fact, well, if there were no weapons, if there were no guns, they don't look at that. They don't look at that possibility. They don't look at the numbers of individuals, the number of cases that have been thwarted. They can't quite bring themselves to grasp that idea. Now, hang on. I'm a gun owner. I ain't turning in my guns either. I'm going to tell you that right now. There's a solution. No. I mean, especially now.
Right.
No. However, I am not stupid enough to believe that if you don't have any guns in the room, no one's going to be killed by a gun. I mean, just look at what's happening on the airports. You can't have a gun within 440 yards of the president. Trust me, I know this. Now, if it's good enough for the president, if that's the way we keep him safe,
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Let's not be silly about this. It's just, if you're going to make an argument with me, oh, and I see you 2 cents. You ready? Okay, good. If you're going to make an argument with me, let's talk about what we do know. What hasn't happened? Because every time you say, oh, well, here's what's happened, I'm going to ask you, well, okay, well, could this have happened if he didn't have a firearm? No. Okay. And what is your suggestion for seeing to it that that would impair this from happening again? Oh, well, and a more difficulty getting a firearm, wouldn't you think?
Could help.
Look, folks, noting that the genie's out of the bottle, there's well over 600,000 guns in this great country of mine, and that's not going to be a roundup. No one's going to turn in their stuff. But there is a way, ladies and gentlemen, to impair those who are seeking to get them now. We'll be back.
It's about that time to get away.